You know those colorful, kind of crusty patches you see growing on old trees or maybe on rocks? You've probably walked past them 1,000 times. But what if I told you they aren't plants at all? That they're actually one of nature's most successful and frankly weirdest partnerships? Well, today we're diving deep into the world of lichens. And if you're a botany student, especially at the MSc level, this is a topic you'll absolutely want to master.
So let's just jump right in with a pretty wild question. Is a lichen basically just a fungus that figured out how to farm? It's a provocative way to think about it for sure, and by the end of this explainer, you're going to understand the really complex science behind that idea and this incredible symbiosis.
All right, here's our game plan for unraveling this mystery. First, we'll talk about the breakthrough idea that completely changed how we see lichens. Then, we'll get to know the two key players in this partnership. After that, we'll look at how they actually build their shared home and how they manage to reproduce. And finally, we'll zoom out to see why these tiny organisms are just so important for entire ecosystems. Ready? Let's get into it.
Okay, first up, let's get to the core concept of what makes a lichen so revolutionary. The key is, it's not one thing, it's a team.
So, at its heart, a lichen is what we call a composite organism. The easiest way to think about it is like a business partnership. You've got the fungus, which we call the mycobiont. It provides the house, the structure, the protection. And then you have the photosynthesizer, the photobiont. This is usually a tiny alga or maybe a cyanobacterium, and it's the one making all the food. You see, on their own, they're just a fungus and an alga, but together, they become something entirely new, a lichen.
For centuries, scientists just assumed lichens were some kind of simple plant. It wasn't until 1867 that this guy, Simon Schwendener, came along with his radical dual hypothesis. He was the one who argued that a lichen wasn't a single organism at all, but a team-up of two, a fungus living with an alga. This was a total game-changer, a complete paradigm shift that really created the foundation for all modern lichenology.
Okay, so we know it's a team. Now let's meet the players. What exactly is each partner bringing to the table? You can almost think of it like a biological contract, where each side has very specific jobs to do.
And this is where the division of labor gets really fascinating. The mycobiont, the fungus, is basically the architect and the landlord. It builds the whole structure, it protects the photobiont from harsh sunlight and drying out, and it's great at soaking up water and minerals from the air and whatever it's sitting on. It even forms these specialized little probes called haustoria to get food from the photobiont. Now, in return, the photobiont is the power plant. It uses photosynthesis to create carbohydrates, that's sugar, pure energy for both partners. And get this, if the photobiont is a cyanobacterium, it brings another superpower to the table, fixing atmospheric nitrogen.
So how do these two partners actually arrange themselves to live together? Let's take a look at the physical architecture of the lichen body, which we call the thallus. Generally speaking, lichens have three basic body plans. You've got crustose lichens, which are like a layer of paint just fused so tightly to a rock or tree bark that you couldn't scrape them off without destroying them. Then you have foliose lichens. These are more leaf-like, with a clear top and bottom side, a dorsiventral structure. Parmelia is a perfect example of this. And finally, you have the fruticose lichens, which are shrubby, three-dimensional, like the delicate little branches of cladonia.
And if we were to slice a foliose lichen open, you can see just how organized this partnership is. Look at this. At the very top, you've got a dense fungal layer, the upper cortex, which acts like a sunscreen and a shield. Right below that, you find the all-important algal layer, where the photobionts are carefully arranged to get just the right amount of sunlight. Underneath that is the medulla, which is a big, airy network of fungal threads for gas exchange. And at the bottom, a lower cortex, often with these root-like things called rhizines, that anchor the whole structure down.
Now, here's a term you'll definitely want to remember for any exam: cephalodia. Some lichens, whose main partner is a green alga, will actually bring a third partner into the mix, a cyanobacterium. But instead of just mixing them all together, they keep the cyanobacteria in these special little pockets, either inside or on the surface. These cephalodia act like dedicated nitrogen-fixing factories, supplying this absolutely vital nutrient to the whole lichen. It's a brilliant bit of functional specialization.
Okay, so we've seen how they're built. But this raises a really fascinating and complex question. How on earth does a two-part organism reproduce? It's a big challenge, and lichens have come up with some very clever ways to solve it.
Just think about that for a second. If you are two different organisms living as one, how do you make sure your offspring get both of the essential partners? It's a real puzzle. And lichens have evolved two very different strategies to tackle this.
So lichens use two main strategies. On one hand, you have vegetative reproduction. Things like Ceridia are like little life rafts. They're tiny, complete packages that have both the fungus and the alga wrapped up together. When they break off and blow away, they can land and immediately start growing into a new lichen. Easy. On the other hand, you have sexual reproduction. See those little cup-like structures, the epitheta? Those are produced only by the fungus. They release fungal spores. But here's the catch.
And this is a hugely important point. When that fungus reproduces sexually, its spores are, well, homeless. They are just the fungus. To form a new lichen, that single spore has to land in a perfect spot and, by sheer luck, find a compatible, free-living algal partner to capture and start the whole symbiotic process over again. We call this relichenization, and you can see it's a super high-risk but high-reward strategy for creating new genetic combinations.
All right, let's zoom out now and look at the bigger picture. What kind of roles do these incredible organisms actually play out in their ecosystems? And how are we thinking about their partnership today?
Lichens are absolute ecological powerhouses. They're often the very first life to show up on bare rock, kicking off what we call primary succession. They secrete special acids that literally dissolve the rock, beginning the long, slow process of making soil. And because many of them are extremely sensitive to pollutants like sulfur dioxide, they're fantastic bioindicators. Their presence or absence tells you a lot about air quality. Plus, they produce this whole cocktail of unique lichen acids that help protect them from getting eaten or overgrown by microbes. So this brings us right back to our opening question. Is this relationship a perfect, happy partnership, or is it maybe something a little more complicated? The way scientists view this has actually changed quite a bit over time.
So the earliest idea was what we called controlled parasitism. The fungus has basically enslaved the alga and is farming it for food. Then the thinking shifted to a mutualistic continuum, which suggests the relationship isn't fixed. It can slide along a scale from beneficial to parasitic depending on the environmental conditions. But the most current and I think most exciting idea is the holobiont concept. This theory says a lichen isn't just a duo, but a whole miniature ecosystem, with the main fungus, the alga, and a whole community of other bacteria and fungi all working together. It's revolutionary because it really makes us question what an individual organism even is.
And to wrap up, I'll leave you with a final thought to chew on, a classic analytical question. When you consider everything we've talked about, the protective structure, the fact that they make their own food, their unique biochemistry, how do all these features work together to give lichens such a massive ecological amplitude? How does it allow them to thrive literally everywhere, from the frozen Arctic tundra to a scorching hot desert? It's that incredible synergy of the partnership that makes them some of the toughest, most resilient organisms on the entire planet.